Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the Abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening.
I'm finding it really difficult this morning to come up with something to say. I think a big part of my job is to support and inspire people in practice. And that can be really difficult sometimes when you're not feeling particularly inspired in practice yourself. So recently, not recently, for a long time in our community, things have always been very tight. I've been involved with Zenwest Victoria Zen Center since 1995, and I don't ever remember a time where there was a tremendous surplus of resources around the Zen Center. In 2005, I became the Abbot, a full-time employee of the Zen Center. It was a tremendous, arguably ridiculous leap of faith on the part of all parties involved, from the board to the members to myself. At that time, I was working for the Vancouver Island Health Authority, and I'd always done the Zen Center off the side of the table after hours, full-time job basically after hours of a full-time job, and I always maintained that position at VHA on condition that the hours didn't change. I took the job. I'd worked lots of part-time on-call positions because I could manipulate my schedule in such a way that I could sustain practice and guide practice at the Zen Center. I took a full-time job because it was 8 to 4, 8:30 to 4:30 every day, Monday to Friday, stable. So I said, okay, because nobody wants to sit between 8:30 and 4:30 Monday to Friday anyway. So that's great. So I had young kids and all that kind of stuff at that time. I think in 2000, around that time, 2000 to 2004, that was when I had my kids. So I had a couple of young babies at home. And in 2000, about early mid-2005, the tone of the work that I was doing began to change. I was working in mental health and addiction services in an organization or a branch of VHA called CSS, Community Support Services. So the job was psychosocial rehabilitation. So the idea was that I was working with clients in the community who had mental health or addiction problems, which, are seldom independent. They're often deeply related. And my job was basically working with people on basic life skills, how to plan to eat for a week, how to take the money that you get and do your shopping, pay your rent, pay your bills, take people to the bank, cooking, banking, and shopping. These are the three main things that I did. Oftentimes it was a matter of like showing up at exactly the right moment when the person and the check arrived together at the same time to ensure that you could help them get just a few groceries before they went to the casino or went to their dealer or went to the liquor store, and because if you missed it by 10 minutes, maybe they wouldn't eat. That was how it was. Along with that, of course, was just assessing the situation. How are they doing in their environment? They were living in the community, so a big part of my job was just trying to help people maintain housing. This is something that we take for granted. One of the arguments that I'm hearing with the current situation with intense city and things is, we just need housing, and stick them in housing and turn jails into housing. But getting housing is actually the easiest part of the equation. But maintaining that was always a challenge. Often the clients that I had didn't have great hygiene skills. Often the clients that I had no experience or even concern about maintaining a place that they live in. Like when you're living on the street and you get up and leave, when you're living in a doorway that smells like piss every day, then your apartment stinking a little bit doesn't bother you so much. But your neighbors will complain and the landlord has problems, and before you know it, if you have any excuse, like you accidentally spend your money on liquor instead of paying your rent, or you're a little bit late a few times, well, you're back to square zero. And that was sort of the job that I had, was just trying to sort of balance, support a number of people in maintaining and finding housing. Oftentimes, part of that maintenance was just assessing how a person was doing. A lot of these people had pretty serious mental health issues, schizophrenia, obsessive-compulsive disorder, all kinds of personality disorders and things like that. And so part of it was just really having your eyes open. I found that Zen was a very powerful tool because a lot of the time it was just a matter of like, sometimes you'd see like little piles of pills all over the apartment where someone had, taken them out of the blister pack, put them somewhere while they were doing something else, and then moved on to something else and didn't take them several times in a week. Anyways, so that was the job, and I actually kind of loved it. And then as time developed, what happened was that resources got crunchier, numbers got crunchier, and so the job that I had started to be less and less supporting the clients that I had in the community as it was policing the clients that I had in the community. And it was started to be things like taxiing them to the Eric Martin so that they could get their injections that they didn't want to have, or interrogating clients about whether or not they were taking their meds, or showing up at their house to watch them take their meds. And I really didn't want to be a med cop. And then the administration decided that it wasn't enough for us to do this during 8:30 to 4:30. It was required that we have this, the medication SWAT team be available around the clock. And so one day the supervisor came and said, "Oh, well, Eshu, it's been a nice run. But we're going to need to change this job that you have from what it is right now to a rotating shift with rotating days off," which is sort of the standard in Viha. I always found that fascinating in a health authority to have a schedule with rotating shifts and rotating days off, possibly the most unhealthy thing a human being can do to themselves. And so briefly, for about 3 days, I was sort of in a conundrum because this was coming. But it didn't take very long, because right at the beginning of the job, during the interview, in fact, I made it quite clear that the way that I could keep this job was that if it stayed stable, and if the shifts started to change and stuff, I had to leave. So I went to the supervisor and I said, well, I guess that's it. I have to hand in my resignation because I can't do this anymore. And she said, well, how can you do that? You've got young children at home, and you're going to need to keep this job in order to do that. And I said, well, yeah, I don't know how this is going to go, but I know that I can't do that. And I don't want to do this job anymore anyway. So I handed in my resignation and didn't really know what I was going to do. All I knew was that the Zen Center was something that was a project, a calling for me. And so I needed to ensure I could go. I was quite confident I could go back to working part-time and shifts and all that kind of stuff to sustain myself and my family, just as long as I could sort of keep the Zen Center going. And then one of the spiritual coordinators at Viha contacted me. We'd worked together a fair bit. Back then I'd often tried to start meditations and meditation groups in Viha for clients, mental health and addiction clients. But at that time, being a monk, I'd been a monk for five or 6 years at that point, and been practicing for about 10 years, maybe a little more. I had a supervisor tell me that it was ridiculous that there's no way that Viha could have me run a meditation group at Viha. And they said that it would be more likely if we could get an occupational therapist to take some kind of a weekend course in meditation, that they would be able to teach it, because that's more the risk management. People would find that less of an insurance problem. So amazing. But anyways, I worked with the spiritual care coordinator often, and I was an advisor for the spirituality and mental health care. There was a panel because anyways, I don't want to get too far into this because I might never be able to get out. Anyways, so he called me and said, "Oh, Eshu, there's a position that's open at Edgewood Clinic, which is a private addictions clinic in Nanaimo." And I thought, "Oh hell, I'll apply for that." So I applied for that, and they called me up for an interview. So I drove the couple hours up to Nanaimo, and sort of the moment I walked in, it was like going from a very public healthcare addictions model where they basically lock you in a room and try to let you dry out, to walking into a fairly high-end addictions clinic where military officers, business executives, doctors, lawyers, and such. I think it was, at that time, it was $10,000 to $20,000 to walk in the door of that place. And basically, they don't tell you when you're getting out. You just have to pay more the longer you have to stay, and they'll let you go basically when they feel like you're ready to go. Different model. And so I had this interview where I felt like I was on Mars, like I was actually emotionally moved by the difference. My job was to work through basically a couple of steps of the 12-step program, which is basically just listening to people talk about the people who they feel that they've harmed, the damage that their addiction has done. Basically, the job of the spiritual director was largely a confessor. Each person had their own room and all of the accoutrements associated with that. And basically the interview took all day. It was like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. or something like that. I had lunch with the medical staff and met with the social services staff and all this kind of stuff. And the whole, the director of the place sat down with me at one point and basically said, we stay in business by making people better. And so anything that you need resources-wise is possible. Any training that you feel like is, you would improve your job, improve the success of the work that you're doing, all you need to do is sort of put a requisition in, and if it seems reasonable, we'll approve it, because we stay in business by making people better. I was like, whoa. And my job here would be to be like a priest, essentially, right? Like a Zen. You're hiring me. You want to hire me because I'm a Zen priest. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, they said, well, everyone's kind of nodding their heads, and we'd like to start you at, I think it was $52,000 a year. And that was way more money than I'd ever made in my sort of piecemeal jobs. And I said, well, gosh, I've got to talk to my family about this. It's a lot of commuting. And they said, oh, no. We can't have you commuting. The Malahat is way too unreliable, and we need these clients are in a sensitive place, and so we would need to have you move to Nanaimo. But don't worry, because we'd cover your moving expenses. Anyway, I said, oh gosh, I got to think about that one, moving to Nanaimo. And it became very clear to me that there was no way that I could, even if I could commute, there was no way that I could do this kind of job, the intensity of working with people in this place in their life. That would be the practice. That would be the spiritual practice. And there's no way that I could do that and then sort of finish that up and go run a Zen center afterwards. There's just no way. And so even on the car ride home, I was sick, like physically kind of nauseated, because I had this really sinking feeling that, there's no way I could take that job. And I came home and I toiled about it for a little while, and I find, with great apprehension, I said to Nikki, Nikki, I don't know, you're going to be mad at me, but I don't think I can take this job. And she said, oh God, finally. She said, I knew that you couldn't take this job from the moment you told me about it. I don't know why you've been having such a hard time with it. So I picked up the phone, and I think I literally said, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I can't take this job. So I went to the board and I said, I don't have any clue how we're going to do this, but we got to make this Zen Center work. So the board at the time said, well, we don't know how we're going to make this work either, but let's try it. And honestly, when I look back to 2005 and think that was 11 years ago, I still have no idea how we made it work for this long. But it's getting harder. I don't know that the numbers are getting any harder or anything like that, but for me personally, it's getting harder. Part of the big shift for me over the past couple of years is really about really recognizing the limitations of mortality, I guess. 10 years ago, I was in my early 30s. When I first started with the Zen Center, I was in my early 20s. And going on next to no sleep, working 2 basically full-time jobs. I could do all that kind of stuff. a couple of years ago, I started to really hit the wall. Around the time of my sister's death, I had almost a complete physical breakdown. And out of that, I was actually required by Choboji and Genjo Osho to take a course that sort of looked at healthy boundaries. And I think I've been doing okay with boundaries as far as between myself and the Zen Center and students. There are some areas that really need to work, but there were a whole bunch of sort of self-assessment exercises, because one of the areas where boundaries can really become jeopardized and collapse, I read about it in Sex and the Spiritual Teacher by Scott Edelstein. And then in this course as well, these self-assessment tools was essentially, when the shit hits the fan, it's usually because the teacher has no resources left. They've pushed themselves so far, or they're so stressed, or they're so exhausted, or they're so financially stressed, because there's lots of boundaries to break, right? The primary ones are substances, sex, and money. Those are the three evils of a spiritual teacher. And every spiritual teacher has a predisposition towards one of those. And so I think that every spiritual teacher is able to maintain integrity, provided that they don't stretch too far. You can stretch too far financially, put yourself at too much risk, and then it becomes tempting when someone says, oh, here's a $100 donation for the Zen Center in cash. Oh. Or here's a special gift, or here's a weekend over here, or here's something. The boundaries can become very transparent, invisible, and you can make mistakes. The same goes with substances. Certainly, it's been more than 2 months now where I haven't had any caffeine, which you might all think, caffeine is a substance. But you know what? When you're drinking 10, 12 cups of coffee a day just to keep going, yeah. And of course, sexual indiscretions are always a possibility for a person who's in authority, who's often working intimately with people. For me, I think early on that might have been one of my dangers, my more significant dangers. But really, I feel like the experiences that I've gone through with Rinzai-ji, with my own close personal friends sort of making those mistakes and seeing the damage, I'm really less inclined. Plus the fact that I'd like to go on living, and I know that if I ever step out of line, you won't need to worry about sustaining me anymore. I'll be dead. Anyways, these readings that I've been doing and this course that I was taking on healthy boundaries really pointed out that there were some real deficiencies in just self-care. I did an assessment of my own sort of social life and really realized that I didn't have one. I had 1,800 friends or something like this on Facebook, and I did an assessment of that. Who were they? What was their relationship to me? Who were the people that I had social relationships with that weren't involved in Zen, that were really just social relationships, friendships, people who I had spent time with in person that weren't associated to Zen. And the frightening thing happened was I realized that almost all of them, maybe a dozen, were people from high school. I hadn't actually been in physical space with them for 25 years, but they were the only people that qualified in that area. What were my social activities? I don't know. Nothing. Zen. So I had some great conversations with the board, particularly with Echo, who's a great support for me, and started to look at how to engage in having a sort of life outside of the Zen center. And started to do some of those things. And since starting to do that, I've been in kind of a varying place of crisis ever since. Because it's really difficult. It requires time. And it requires energy. And it requires caring to have relationships and to have interests. And yet there's still this Zen center that's there. And it's a big organization now. And there's a lot of things to do. It's not just sitting here and giving self-indulgent talks about, what's going on for me. I wish that was all there was to it. It's not just meeting with students. It's not just taking early morning phone calls when people are in some kind of spiritual crisis. But there's the financial management of things and the marketing management of things and coordinating all the teams and making sure that information is going out to members. There's a lot of just administration. And the truth is that since trying to have a life, not to mention sort of residential training, which crops up occasionally, and last fall I realized that it's actually not really possible to have a life and do monastic training with people. But I'm willing to sacrifice that for parts of the year. But man, last fall, doing a play, having my kids grow up and all their school activities, having a residential monastic student, I don't think I'll do that again. That was really crazy. Anyways, and so one of the things that I deal with on a regular basis is guilt. Our community continues to struggle. Our community continues to really, rely on miracles to continue. We're right in the middle of a fundraising drive where the target to keep our operations afloat is $8,000. And I'm going, I have no idea how that's going to happen. There are things that need to be done all the time. There are things that are falling behind. And I float between, I really feel like I need to commit to having some to taking care of myself. And I have the support, coming from the board and from my personal support people that, this is a valuable thing. But every day, I'm ready to just throw it away. Forget it. I don't need to be doing this. I don't need to. Relationships they're taking time, they're taking energy, and this community is taken on water. And that's my responsibility. A lot of it is my fault, too, because as the Zen Center has grown and developed from early days, I've been very strict. I've been very traditional in the the authority to do things, making sure that I know that people are going to do things consistently with the standards that have been sort of established in our community. And I'm still really reluctant to sort of turn that over. But more and more, I'm really recognizing that this is not going to last. What we've got going on here and what we've enjoyed for the past decade is not going to last if we don't make some significant changes. The revenue has remained consistent for the past, 5 or 6 years. The expenses has remained in line with the revenue that we've been able to generate. But the cost of things hasn't. The expenses that we need to pay for hasn't stayed consistent. We've just done it with less and less and less every year. I hope you're all feeling uplifted now and inspired, because and still I feel optimistic, but I need your help. Maybe there was a time where I wanted to be the person that could do everything. Maybe there was a time where I wanted to, have my hand in every aspect of the pie and learn all the skills required to run a Zen center and just be better than everyone at everything I could be. I'm too old now, and I'm only 43. I'm too old. This organization, our community, is too big for one person to run, to control, to do all the work. And I'm not saying I do all the work, because I don't. Everybody does a lot of work. But if we're going to continue, if this organization is going to survive, and God, I don't want it to survive. I don't want it to sustain. I don't want it to get through. The sort of tagline we have is, "We make Zen come alive." This is an aspiration of thriving, of abundance and nourishment for anyone who wants to participate in our community. And I feel like we're all hungry right now. So, if you've got skills, if you've got talent, if you've got time, if you've got energy, if you've got resources, our community needs them. I need them. Because I can't keep going. So these Sundays, the first Sunday of the month is Sangha Sunday. And Sangha is a word that means community of practitioners. And the community of practitioners is always, for me, been the most elusive aspect of these three treasures. To have a teacher, or to be a teacher, I can do. To represent and share and uphold the Dharma, I can do. But the Sangha I can't do. I'm just a guy. One. I can work towards creating the space for Sangha to happen. I can try to manipulate circumstances in which Sangha might happen. But Sangha is something that requires a whole bunch of people to really consciously invest themselves. Invest themselves not just financially, but emotionally, time-wise, energy-wise. But most of all, Sangha requires a group of people to feel like there's a value to that. There's a reason that I want to do that. There's a purpose to that. There's a benefit to that. And I can't do it. I've seen periods in this community where that struggle, that challenge, that value in community has been obvious. Times when members in our community have really been struggling, and there have been people there for them, whether that's just sitting on a cushion while I'm melting down and bawling my eyes out and snot's coming out of my nose and I'm a total wreck and I'm talking about the shitty things that happened to me in the past and the horrible relationships that I'm in the present and the terrifying fears that I have of the future. And there's people around me to support me, not in a there, not in a it's all going to turn out okay way, but just to sit with me, to be with me, and to share that, to manifest compassionately with me. And in those circumstances, when we share that through practice and through life, things like the harvest potluck or the camping trips we used to do, or just having tea and coffee after practice, the value of that community was obvious, was known. It's difficult when things are stable relatively, or they seem stable. It's difficult when, having come through a difficult time, I'm feeling all right, or most of the people who are in the community are feeling all right. And sometimes when the community's like that, everything's sort of on keel and feeling pretty stable, when the shit hits the fan for you, it's difficult to bring it up because you don't want to be a downer. You don't want to upset the really sort of placid, happy vibe of the community. But that's what community's for. And honestly, my feeling is like if we don't have that opportunity, if you don't share your trouble, if you don't share your difficulties with the community, we're all just getting lazy. We're all just becoming further and further separate because we just think, they're all right, Jack, you're fine, you're doing great, obviously, you're showing up, you're not saying anything's wrong, so it's all good. But the truth is, it's not. So one of the things that we've been talking about a lot at the board and in strategic planning is that in many spiritual communities, the concept of community is kind of, there's a culture. And a person coming into that kind of a spiritual community or a Sangha can learn about that through osmosis. There's a group of people who know the drill, who know what to do when this kind of stuff happens, who know, how to fire up the soup brigade and, like the carpooling brigade and all that kind of stuff. And so as a person coming into that community, you can be indoctrinated. You can just learn the ropes from the experienced people in that community. It's a wonderful thing. But what we have at the Zen Center is a group of people who are fringy, who maybe most of us have never participated in a community like that, or like anything. We don't have systems in place, established old traditions of how to care for one another. In fact, when we talk about community, when we talk about Sangha, I think that there are as many definitions of what that is as there are members in our communities. And I think that this is a part of our real problem as a community, is that we're not talking about the same thing. And one of the things that we've really been talking about in strategic planning and at the board is the need to really have our community come together to talk about community. What does community mean to you? And most excitingly, I think, what do we want our community to be? Because this is something that we sort of all assume that there is a sort of plan or a structure or a format or something like this, but there isn't. And I've seen that cause significant disappointment in people. If you really feel like, oh, I've got a really great community, we talk about it all the time, and Tuesday sits, man, oh, the community we have is amazing. And it's nice. But the truth is, I've seen people also say, hey, I need help. And there be crickets. Because I don't think it's necessarily because we're bad people or because we don't want to help. But we don't actually know how to help sometimes. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to even ask what's going to be helpful for us to do. So here's another thing. I can't take that on. This is something that our community, members of our community, really need to, I feel, really need to address. We need to come together and have conversations. What do we want community to be? What do we want to be able to lean on in our community? And most importantly, most importantly, really recognizing what that means for us as individuals in this community as far as what we need to be willing to commit and to give to our fellow members and to people in our community. How can we share? What do we have to share when we're tired, when we are busy, when we really don't want to? How are we going to be able to do it anyway? Because it's part of our community, because that's a person in our community that we are all communally responsible to help. Anyway, if there's inspiration in this, I don't know. I think for me, if there's inspiration in this, it's that we live in a world that is, I think, more and more destructive of community. We have a culture and a society and a general sort of attitude in our country, I think, and in the West generally, that's really focused on being individuals and really focused on getting our own way and being successful in our own way in the world. And in the midst of that, we have this practice, and we have this form, and we have this organization, and we have this seed, this community seed. We have a group of people that I really love spending time with, that I know most of you, sometimes more intimately than a lot of people get to know you. Maybe more intimately than you know each other. But we have really amazing people in this community. And sometimes I feel like it's like I've got all these people in the same room and they don't know how awesome they all are. And if we could just figure out a way to let them all know how awesome they all are, we wouldn't have to work very hard at a community really blossoming. It would just take us sort of talking about how to create a community rather than just sort of waiting for it to happen magically. Taking active, conscious, intentional action at structuring and building our community rather than just waiting for it to magically happen. I was talking at the beginning just about the miracle of how this whole operation has continued, and it really has. And I mean, I don't get it at all. I don't understand it at all. But here we are, and I feel like right now, our community, me, myself, as a person, the whole thing is standing on this balance. It's a tipping point, or it's a dip, and it's like we are at risk. We are at risk of it coming apart because it's just too fucking hard. Or we are at risk of actually doing this and becoming really bountiful and successful and thriving. And it's like, there's mediocrity for years. We're sort of scraping by. But I think that we're at a point now where we need to either commit and go all in, or we need to just say it was nice. I know what I'd prefer, but each of us has to make our own decisions. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.